And welcome back. Previously we had started creating a scene and I went ahead and added a couple more clouds in here because I felt that I needed a little bit more into my scene. But what we want to do today is go ahead and take the same scene that we have done and go ahead and animate it. So I'm just going to go ahead and for now to get started, I'm going to take these different layers that I have and I'm actually going to group them together. So I'll call this group 1. So maybe I call this midday. All right, so there's my sun at midday. Sounds good. And we want to show, let's say, a quick traversal between the different times of day. So for example, maybe we have sunrise, maybe we have sunset, we might have nighttime. So we want to go ahead and create a couple different ones. So we can actually just go ahead and take this group that we have right here, this midday group, and we can actually go ahead and just duplicate that group so that way we don't have to do this every time. We don't have to recreate certain things. For example, the ground is not going to change much. It might change in some of the tone, but the position of the ground won't change. The trees won't change. So let's go ahead and create one for sunset. We'll create another one for sunrise. Let's make one more for midnight. And that should give us a good starting. We can add more if we need to. But let's go ahead and now put these in order of how they should be, just so it makes it easier for us to kind of think about things. So sunset should probably happen after midday. So I'm just going to drag it to the bottom, and midnight will happen last. All right, so we have sunrise, midday, and sunset. And we already know our midday looks good because we already took care of that. But let's go to our sunrise layer first, and let's think about what we need to change within our sunrise layer. So for example, if we're doing sunrise, well, our sun is probably not at this position in the sky. So let's just use our quick select tool, grab that sun, and let's go ahead and move the sun, and we maybe will want to bring him down. Here we go. So he's down, but now also notice he's on the ground. That's not good. So we actually want to move the sun so it's below the ground layer. Now, if you ever think about the sun during the course of the day, during the sunrise, it's quite large. So we actually want to scale this image up a little bit here. So we're going to go to not file, but edit. And let's go ahead and scale the sun up here a little bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and increase that height and width by 100 to 150%. And that should be good. And now that it's scaled up, let's also go ahead and recolor that. Because again, remember the sun, when it first comes up in the beginning of the day, it's not quite the same color as what we have later in the day. So let's go ahead and recolor that. Now we have several options here. We can go ahead and just physically recolor which individual pixels and stuff, or we could add in here our own filter. So for example, if we go into hue and saturation and we apply that to this sun layer here, now we have to be careful because if we try scaling the whole thing, we could affect other layers that we don't want to affect, which of course is something that could happen here. But you notice right now, we're pretty lucky. It only seems to really be affecting the sun. All right, none of the other layers seem to be being affected by it. So we actually want to, for this case, maybe take that hue and swing it a little bit more towards the reds here. All right, now if we go too far red, you can see it doesn't quite get the effect that we want. We only actually wanted to kind of have more of an orangish tone maybe. So we're actually going to be very careful with our slider here and just adjust it just a little bit so it has a little bit more of that orangish tone. Now, of course, the sun is not the only thing that's going to change. Our clouds are probably not going to be in this same position. So we are actually going to set these whole things. I'm just actually going to take the whole cloud scene here, and I'm actually going to move the entire cloud scene so that they are actually pretty much off screen, maybe just on the screen just a little bit, just so we have some movement. But they're going to actually start off screen here. So they're going to come in, then they're going to move here, and then they're eventually going to cycle through by the end of the day. And we also know that our sky is not the same. And again, there's different ways we can do this. We can do a whole filter over the whole scene. And that's another thing we could do instead of doing a hue saturation layer. I could, of course, just create another layer, which we learned last time. Grab our fill bucket tool, and instead of making this green, let's do more of a red. We know the sky is a little more red in the morning. That looks pretty good there. Let's go ahead and fill that in. And we can, of course, adjust the fill and opacity here. Of course, we have to be careful with how we manipulate that layer, because if we do too much, you can see it's not quite achieving the same effective results. So I actually might just say, you know what? I want this to have the same properties of what goes on here. So I'm going to go to the sky layer. Let's go ahead and do hue and saturation. And again, I'm going to go ahead and move that sky. All right. Now I have to be careful here because again, it can affect things that we don't want to, but it looks like for our purposes, it's only affecting really that piece that we want it to affect. Now, the one thing that we'll notice about this is that it does kind of go pretty drastic. And we can also use our saturation values here, or even our lightness values, to kind of affect how some of the sun looks. So when the sun is first coming up, we know the sky is kind of much more red. So we can also, of course, just apply a new gradient if we want, and that might be the best course of action to do here. So let's go ahead and do a gradient, and we're going to go for more of a reds in this case. And I think this one right here might be good, or maybe, there we go, that one looks pretty good. And remember, we have the darker colors here, but when the sun's coming up, it's going to be brighter around the sun and darker here. So when I draw this line, I got to make sure I have the darker reds up here and the lighter colors down here. All right. And so that we got that going on, looks pretty good. And we probably actually want more of a radial view here because it's going to be kind of going around the sun here, for lack of a better term. And now this looks pretty good for our sunrise. So now let's go ahead and repeat the same process. Now effectively we could duplicate this for sunset because it's effectively the same thing as the sunrise. It's going up and coming back down. So actually let's just go ahead and do that. Let's just go ahead and duplicate that, and let's just call this sunset again. And then we'll take this sunset that we duplicated earlier, delete that out, and drag our new sunset in. So effectively when we look at this, the sun is going to go up and it's going to come right back down, but that's okay. And even though we know it does have the exact same traversal, we can affect that right here. Let's go to sunset, and let's go to the sun here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and select that sun again, and let's actually just move it just a little bit here, just to show that there is some movement of the sun during the day. Oh, looks like my sun didn't move here. Let's try this again. Let's go ahead and select the sun. Oh, deselect here first. Select the sun. Am I on the sunset layer? Yes, I am on sun. Oh, wait. I know. It's because I'm looking at the other layers here. There we go. There's our sun right there. Looks good. Actually, let's go ahead and move him again. Deselect. Grab the sun layer. I just want to maybe just move him down just a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. And now let's go ahead and hide that layer. Let's go to our midnight layer. And the first thing we're going to do is, of course, change our sky. So we're going to say, you know, the cloud layer for midnight, let's just go ahead and have a clear sky tonight. And the sun, we're actually going to go ahead and hide too, because the sun's not out. Instead, we need to actually make a new layer. Let's just call this moon. And we have several options of different things we could do here. But let's say we want to add in that moon that we had made earlier. And so let's go ahead and open that up here, and we're going to go ahead and drag that in here. I'm going to pause the video, come back, and just see if you can go ahead and see, if you can, based upon what we did the last few scenes, see if you can do the same thing here. But let's go ahead and see if we can insert your moon, and then go ahead and maybe a couple stars in, make the sky a darker color. Let's just see what you can come up with. All right, welcome back. And here's what I did is I went ahead and imported my moon. I actually took out the stars in the background that were already created for it, and I went ahead and from there made a gradient of black and white here for my sky. You can see I have a little bit of glow here along the horizon, and added a couple stars in here to kind of help break up the night sky as well. And so it wasn't a huge change from what we had. Now of course we could do other things here, like for example, maybe I want to have these trees be a little bit darker and stuff like that. So I could of course go here and apply different features here. So maybe I want to decrease the saturation of those trees a little bit to kind of help show that it's nighttime there. And that really helps pop that out to really make that look much more like a night scene. All right, but at this point we've gone ahead and created the different scenes. We have our sunrise, our midday, our sunset, and of course our midnight. So it's not really much that we can kind of do too much with until we actually animate it. So let's go ahead and open up our timeline now, create a frame animation. And we only have 4 effectively right now. So let's go ahead and create 4 animations. And the nice thing is, because we did everything in groups, I can go ahead and say in that first frame there, I want that, for example, to be my sunrise. And then I want that second frame, I want that to be midday. And third frame, that could be my sunset. And the fourth frame could be my midnight. And so right now these have no delay on them. So when I press play, so it goes crazy fast here. So I might say, you know what, I don't want that to be 0 seconds. Maybe I want to slow that down a little bit so it has time to transition. So let's try 0.2 seconds here just to see how this looks here. And at 0.2 seconds with the delay, I press play, you see we got a little bit more transition here between each frame, and that's not a bad transition here. The only thing is we could use additional frames to kind of show a much more smooth transition. And of course, that would be adding, like, for example, if we have our sunrise and midday, we could add another frame in between those to kind of show the sun before it gets to that point. So for example, if I go back here to sunrise, I might say, you know, I want another layer. Maybe I call it early morning, or maybe I just call it morning. And then I could have maybe one called afternoon, just to kind of give a more of a transition between each of these different scenes. And again, this is only 4 frames, so it moves really quickly here, but it allowed us to kind of really quickly create a scene with this. And so what I want to challenge you to do to wrap up your challenge here today is go ahead and do this, but see if you can add in another scene here just to kind of smooth this out a little bit. Let's go ahead and create scenes for, I'm going to challenge you to go ahead and create one for morning that you can do right after sunrise. Have one after your midday called afternoon. Move that in properly instead of putting it inside. And then after our sunset, let's go ahead and, because we go from sunset right on down, if you remember, it goes boom into boom. There's nothing really to kind of indicate the chance for all those other scenes to come in, so we might add one in here. Let's just duplicate this group, and let's just call that twilight. All right, and so that should give you enough to kind of work with to kind of fill this out, give yourself a few more frames, because you see now instead of having just 4 frames of animation, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frames of animation. And of course we could add one more where we could call it, you know, something else. We could add a before the sun even comes up, where the moon maybe and the stars kind of disappear. Call it pitch black. It doesn't matter. Go ahead, animate those, create your own scene, and let's see how those all come together, because next time we're going to start taking all the stuff that we've talked about with all these different types of animations that we've done and use that towards creating our first sprite sheet.